Hello, welcome to the Parenting Program Show. I am your host, Jeremy, the Kung Fu Guy. I am a force of nature married to another force of nature. Her name is Autumn, and we have two amazing, explosive balls of energy called kids. I am a speaker, teacher, author, catalyst, and Kung Fu master, here to help you empower your kids to speak up and own their voice. We're going to unlock and remove the chains of childhood that seem to hold us from our destiny with the tools to have inner strength, confidence to speak up, be heard, and be understood. Let's go play. Game on, yo. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Parenting Program Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy, the Kung Fu Guy, and today I'm excited because I am joined by Mr. Brian Scrone, who is best-selling author. And if I could just tell you a little bit about him briefly, he is, as a self-described, simple man who loves God, his family, and his friends, and surfing the world's oceans. His life's summit, I love this, is to swim in the warm surf waves with his great-grandchildren on his 100th birthday. And literally that gives me like goosebumps because I'm like, my goal is 136. So, adding that more flavor and juice to it is beautiful. And in spite of a lucrative career in real estate investing that affords him freedom of time, his true success is the idea of loving, being loved, and serving. And so he uses his time very wisely by practicing the 5 F's, which we may or may not touch on today, but you definitely want to get a copy of his international best-selling book so that you can add this strategy to your life and to your family. Once upon a time, he wasn't always clear on who he was and what makes him truly happy and how to achieve that. And now he's there. He gets it. And if you're not there yet, he'd love to help. And that's why we're talking today, is to talk all about empowerment strategies. So Brian, welcome to the program. Love to have you here.
Yeah, honored to join you. Thanks, Jeremy.
And I know I just read that bio. If you could just give us a brief, couple of sentences, how would you describe right now live in your own words? How would you describe where you are, what you do, how you help?
Yeah, great. So I am a full-time real estate investor. I also am an author, as you mentioned, and do quite a bit of speaking around the world. So the way I occupy my time, and I guess the highest and best use of my time when it comes to business, which we'll start with, is getting on stages and speaking to large audiences about how I can help them free up their time through passive investments using real estate. What I'm really passionate about is family and friends that you also mentioned. And in the book, I talk about and how I prioritize these borderless and timeless relationships of faith, fitness, family, friends, and finance. And we probably won't touch on all of them today in depth because of timing, but maybe we can revisit that later. But just really excited to have you or for you to have me and be able to hopefully add some value to your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So, people who know me know I'm all about how to empower our kids to speak up and to own their voice. And, I've watched your travels across the world, literally, the adventures you take. I'm like, man, this guy's always on vacation, but somehow you get work in there and you get family and faith and service. You're always kind of stacking things together. So what would you say, how do you work with, you're a busy guy, got a lot of stuff going on. How do you empower your kids so that they're able to voice their concerns or they're able to have their say in what's going on in life?
Yeah, well, I wish I had like a magic pill or a silver bullet to answer that question. But in true honesty, I wake up every day just like the listeners and put my pants on the same way you guys do and bump up against all kinds of challenges. But I think the one thing that I've been really blessed with is to be able actually to have that freedom of time. I think without a freedom of time, the conversation can look and go very differently with your children. And to be honest with you, your loved ones, fill in the blank, any relationship. But specifically with children, my kids are 6 and 8 years old. I have 2 boys that are, you probably see in the picture over my shoulder there. And they are full of energy. They are what I would describe as full-on boys. So the fact that I have been able to set myself up to have some type of freedom of time and be really clear on how I prioritize that time with them allows me to connect with them, I think, in a really cool way. With all that said, I don't have it figured out to reiterate, but I think I can share some simple, cool tools with the listeners that have been phenomenal for me. And I never, ever talk about anything unless it's from experience. I never want to teach or speak from theory. So looking forward to delving into that. I think the 10,000 foot view is one-on-one time. I said I don't have a magic pill, but I really do. I have two boys. I think probably a lot of the listeners may have multiple children or just multiple younger um, generations that they want to connect with. And I have found that being a father of two and running businesses and being married and wanting to chase my own passions of surfing and traveling, separating that time with my boys away from both their mother, my wife, and their siblings and other family members, and taking them away on a very regular basis
Mhm.
has been an absolute game changer. That's probably what I would consider a silver bullet.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of the things I'm seeing a lot with fathers, especially, is that sense of presence and that ability to literally make time. Because I have a video coming out here soon that's it's about your kids want your presence, not presents. They don't want you to go buy stuff and say, "Hey, I was gone. Sorry, I have other things that are important. I bought you this token." They really want you to be engaged in their life and involved and asking questions and just being present, especially little boys. Hey, dad, look at me. Look what I can do. Look how big I am. Look how strong I am. Look how brave I am. I don't need your help. You need my help. Mom, look at me. Notice me. Pay attention to me. Hello. And there's that energy. So if we can give them presence, that just, it opens up so much. And like you said, doing it strategically where it's individual, not just let me take both boys. Let me take one. Let me take one. Let me take both of you sometimes too. And making
Sure.
that a priority. That's perfect. For you, did you start with, you knew right out of the gate, what, I'm going to get into investment. I'm going to do into real estate, and that's how I'm going to just make life happen. So how did you find your balance? You talk about surfing. How did you find where's Brian, and how do you function with all of the people around you? How did you find that voice for you?
I went to a very dark place as a youngster in my life, which I talk about in depth in the book. And, not to sound cliche, but definitely came out of that darkness and scrambling for light and trying to just survive. And that's where I think, going back to those relationships and being very clear on how I prioritize them has allowed me to have a lot more, number one, freedom of time, which then frees up energy and space and creative. I'm able to be focused on the children when I need to. I'm able to be focused on my business when I need to. And, it's like you compartmentalize these relationships, but then there's got to be a flow, like you mentioned earlier. I do travel a lot. I take the family on what look like business trips, but we have a ton of fun along the way.
Mhm, mhm. Perfect. And yeah, so to go into that for a second, because a lot of us, we all have darkness in our life in some way. And I don't want to gloss over, I don't want to delve into it too much because I know you also covered in your book. So thinking about that darkness, thinking about those challenges and those difficulties, you and I both know so many people, men especially, who run away from that stuff, and then they become slaves to those fears or slaves to those experiences. If you could give somebody one or two tips, like how to move through that, even just one idea to help them if they're in that place, and it's like, as Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep going. So what would you say to someone and say, hey, there is light? What advice would you give to them?
It's a process, not an event, but I would say start with giving yourself the space and being able to love on yourself and forgive yourself.
Mm.
And that sounds very intangible and like this woo-woo shit that's out in the ether somewhere. But I think that there's some cool tools that you can use. Just to share a couple of the tools, I think daily practice of being alone, which, to use some famous quote from Pascal, which is, all of our troubles stem from our inability to sit alone for 5 minutes with ourselves. And I think that that's so simple, but so powerful. So I have a very regimented rituals and morning routine, which a lot of the listeners probably do as well. If you don't, I recommend you trying to start that immediately because it's been a game
Absolutely.
changer. I mean, it's how you start your day is how your day is going to go. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? We're not talking about splitting atoms here. If you take space to love on and nurture yourself and get quiet and forgive yourself, because we are going to screw up on a daily basis. I'm the first guy to admit that. And my children and my wife would be happy to raise their hand and tell you how much I screw up. But I think they'd also say that I'm pretty good at asking for forgiveness and also forgiving myself. So, again, It sounds intangible, and it's a whole process, right? Like every morning I get up and I got to start again, put my shoes on and go out into the day just like the listeners. But having the space and these rituals and the clear priorities, I think, is really what has given me a lot of peace and moving through all that shit that I went through as a young teen. There was about a decade of really, really deep bad times that I went through in my life. And I look back on it and I think, thank God I had that, because it's truly been a game changer for me in helping me figure out what really matters most.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what you said at the very, very beginning, being able to just be alone with yourself and not make yourself wrong, just be, breathe, notice. And that concept of forgiving yourself. I think sometimes people get caught up in this idea, well, if I forgive, that means I'm okay with the situation, or it's okay if it continues. And it's like, no, you can acknowledge, I made some choices and I got some results, and now I've learned and I'm going to elevate and raise my standards. And I realized who I was then. I had to crawl before I could walk, before I could run. And I'm done with the crawling part. Let's get to that next phase. But occasionally we all, throw your back out, get tired. We all may have to crawl occasionally just to remind ourselves, oh yeah, this is why I like walking. This is why I like running. This is why I like flying.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on what you said there, because I think that's a great segue, forgiveness is definitely a priority for me, and forgiving those that matter most to me. But I am very, very regimented on having clear boundaries, even with family and friends that I grew up with, that I love and I want to nurture the relationships. But if I'm not getting and giving value to that relationship, I am pretty quick to create a healthy boundary there. And I look at it as, you could either butcher knife it or you could butter knife it. And I have found that butter knifing it is very unhealthy and very toxic.
Right. Yeah. I call it reciprocity, right? If the energy is not flowing both directions, it's always going one only. That's an imbalance and it needs to be adjusted. And we can have a conversation. And then if things don't change, if the behavior doesn't change, then second conversation is going to be consequences. And then it's going to be a different relationship going forward, simply because it's not fair to me and everybody else in my life if you're just going to like suck the life out of me. Be a vampire, do that somewhere else. Here's some Clamato, have a nice life. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Yeah. And back to the foundation of our children, they're watching us like hawks, and they are so intuitive and you cannot bullshit them. So I talk, if my 6 and 8-year-old were sitting at the table here with me, which they were this morning before we took them to school, I don't talk any differently in front of them. And I know that some people might think that if they heard me, it might be, I grew up in New Jersey where we got a little bit of an edge to us, and I like to wear my heart on my sleeve. And if I'm passionate about something, the kids are going to know about it. And sometimes an F-bomb will fly, and maybe I think the shock is worn off for them by now that they're 6 and 8 with that. But I think that they appreciate that I'm not trying to snowball them or bullshit them, because at the end of the day, they're going to see right through that so quickly.
Yep.
And then a disconnection happens, right?
Yep.
So I'd rather be real and a little bit raw and maybe a little bit rough around the edges than most people. It's where my comfort zone is. And, I think it's working good for me at home anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a phrase that is, don't be afraid your kids are not listening. Be afraid they're always watching, because they'll see that integrity, and they'll see how you live and how you behave is who you really are. So you can put up all these walls and masks and pretend, or you can just be real. And that will actually drive the wrong people away from you and draw the right people to you. And so, looking at that idea of how to empower your kids, you speaking up for yourself and just being where you are, they're going to copy your language patterns. So it's not like, oh, hey, I'm going to swear, but don't you dare. And it's teaching them the right time and place to use those choice words, because they are intensifiers and they do amplify. They're like spices for when you're talking. They're just words. It's what you put to it. My grandfather on my mom's side, for him, the worst word he would ever say is fudge. And I was like, but mom, if that has the same emotional intensity to him as somebody who uses a different letter that begins with F, he's still swearing. It's still the same emotional release. It's still the same stuff. And then I got kind of like, shut up, boy. Don't use those words. Alrighty. Yeah, it's just the different standards. So what do you think inspires you to keep doing the work that you do for yourself, on yourself, as you move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I am a lifelong student. I'm constantly investing in continuing education and live events. So I speak at a lot of live events from stage, but I love being in the audience as a student just as much. It's just a different juice that I get from it. but I want to make sure I'm answering your question correctly. Can you repeat the question? I don't want to go off. Sometimes I get scattered.
No, you're fine. I don't remember what my question was exactly. Oh yeah, what inspires you? That's what it was. No, I just remembered. It's
What inspires me?
what keeps you
Great.
going? What keeps you going?
Yeah, the opportunity to serve, like I talked about in my bio. The
Mhm,
thing that juices me in my day-to-day life of business is conversations like this.
mhm.
The internet is an incredible leverage tool to be able to speak to potentially millions of people. Who knows where this video will go? It could go viral, or one person could watch it.
Mhm.
And I really don't care. I don't get wound up and stay up at night thinking about views and all that stuff. I try to put out the value the best I can, and then I just trust that the world is going to receive the message however and whenever it's supposed to. The beauty about like a recording, I see this recording going on up in the upper left-hand corner, is it's evergreen, right? Someone could watch this interview in 100 years and take one nugget from something that maybe you said or a question you asked or maybe
Mhm.
how I responded. And that's really exciting. And then the live element of speaking from stages and looking at people in the eye when you come off stage and having follow-up conversations, that's what gets me excited. That's what I'm truly and honestly passionate about. And I love the ability to be able to leverage my time and whatever I'm talking about or teaching to a group. I think that because again, going back to that freedom of time, if I can speak to 1,000 people and send the same message, it would take me a long time to have 1,000 phone calls, right? So
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, I'm all about, I do have a good work ethic. I grew up in New Jersey, New York, where if you don't, you die.
Mm.
But moving through being an entrepreneur and building businesses and starting out broke and making millions of dollars before I was 30 and then going broke again in the 2008 crisis.
Ugh.
And then fast forward to today, 10 years, 11 years later, doing very well and being very humble but grateful.
Mhm.
Um, uh, you know, I think money's a really interesting thing. It's something that we avoid in traditional educational conversations, but I have it all the time with my children, and my wife and I have a weekly business meeting. It's just part of these rituals that I mentioned earlier.
Yep. Yeah, well, it's the advice from on high. In polite society, we don't talk about politics, we don't talk about religion, and we don't talk about money. But if we keep people in the dark about those three things, what grows in the dark, right? Mold, rot, decay, insects. So, do you think the people at the higher levels, do you think they talk about those things? Do they educate their kids? So, we've got to have those conversations and we've got to separate somebody's self worth from their net worth because bank account doesn't mean you're a higher caliber of person, right? There are people, hedge fund managers, some of them are sociopaths, and they don't care. It's bouncing the ledger sheet, destroy lives, doesn't matter. The numbers say do this, they do this.
Yeah.
Versus somebody like you, it's look, I'm out, I'm in the trenches, I'm making things happen, I've built, I've lost, I've recovered. Let me save you time. Let me help you. And that's really like our job as dads, me as a Kung Fu father too, as a martial arts Sifu. Let me save you time. I've done enough dumb crap. Don't make my mistakes. Make your own mistakes. Make new mistakes. Let me learn from you. And then we both win. We both expand.
Yeah.
So if I could ask you, thinking about your sons in 10 years, right? They'll be 18 and 16, close to graduating high school, going out in life.
Yeah.
If you could pick two, maybe three things that they could do, achieve, have, be, that you would know you were the best father you could be to them, what would you want as your like deliverables or your outcome?
Self-love and self-forgiveness. I mean, I touched on it earlier. Um, I've done hours and countless hours thinking about how I would actually whittle that down because there's a big wide world of information out there. And I actually went through an extremely powerful process. I don't know if you know a guy named Philip McKernan, but he's a close friend. He has this global movement now that's called the One Last Talk, which the listener should definitely take a look at.
Very cool.
And so, yes. So in a nutshell, you're going to get hit by a truck tomorrow. What are the lessons, a couple of gifts that you want to leave your children or your wives or your loved ones if you know you're going to get hit by a truck tomorrow? So um, immediately I came back at him with the 5 Fs because I was in the middle of writing the book and I'm all juiced and amped up on it. And he questioned me and he took a step back and he's a no bullshit guy. And he said, really, is that really what you want to send them? And then I got quiet for a few minutes and I just got overwhelmed with all kinds of emotion. I broke down and cried like a puppy in his arms. And I said, you're right. I'm sort of beating around the bush here. And really what I would want to leave with them is the ability to love themselves and be able to forgive themselves. And I think from that, every other relationship, the family, the friends, the fitness, the faith, all the external relationships, faith is an internal relationship, the others are external,
Mhm.
are going to flow so much easier and so with so much more joy if you can start with loving on yourself. And it sounds narcissistic and it may sound conceited, but to me, it's the most selfless and spiritual thing you can do is to start. Charity starts at home, because if I'm not taking care of myself, I'm going to be an asshole husband, father, person to work for, with. So I really, really do try to nurture myself. Right before you and I started this call, I went to took the kids to school this morning and did our rituals. And then I go to the beach because that's where I find solace. So, my kids watch that, and I know that they see that and they ask for that time, that one-on-one time. So
Perfect.
trying to drop those seeds early.
Yeah, I love the fact also your answer was like boom, instant. You had it, no hesitation. And the model to keep in mind, this is for listeners at home, you can't give what you don't have, right? You want to give $1 million to charity, you don't have $1 million, you're in pain. You want to give love to other people, but you don't love yourself. Is it really genuine? Or are you going to like martyr yourself and die all over the stage and look at all the things I'm doing for you, you ungrateful SOBs, and all that stuff. And it's like, but wait. Loving yourself doesn't mean indulging yourself. It doesn't mean placating yourself, because that's where that forgiveness fits in, because then you can recognize you love yourself, but you can still hold a high standard. You can still hold yourself. In the book West Point Way of Leadership, they talk about going towards the harder right. What does the greatest good for the most number of peoples? You got to include yourself in that equation, of course, but with your ability, talent, skills, knowledge, gifts, what can you do to help the most number of people and yourself to the best of your ability? And sometimes that means you drop down in priorities and other people jump up. But like you said, take that quiet time, take that personal time, that recharge. And for a lot of masculine men, that spiritual recharge actually is out in nature and alone, because we feel ourselves connected to something bigger and greater and larger. And it's not some priority being pushed on us from outside. It's not some got to get this done, no schedules, no time. It's literally just being present out in nature is the best gift we could give ourselves. And so you're teaching that to your sons, you're modeling it. That's beautiful. So I commend you for that. And sharing it here now, this is going to ripple out, and there's going to be dads that are like, but I'm too busy, I'm too stressed, I'm too fill in the blank. What would you say to them? They say, this is great, get up early, but dude, I'm already not sleeping enough, I'm already stressed.
I would
There's
ask
no way.
I would ask a very straightforward question to that type of feedback and say, well, what's more important, the balance in your checkbook or your relationship with your child? And that's up for them to answer. Like, I never prescribe anything to anyone. I just, again, try to, talk and share and learn from experience. And when you ask the right questions, the right answers will find themselves.
Yup.
And so that's why I love breaking down those 5 things. And then I have some simple tools, and there's free downloads of that stuff in the book and on my website for the user to figure out, okay, everyone has family. Well, first of all, everyone has faith, and this has nothing to do with religion. This is faith
Right.
is religion, relationship with self. Everybody has some type of family, whatever that looks like. We all hopefully have a couple of friends, and then fitness and finance, right?
Right.
So my question would be, how do you prioritize those 5 things? And then the second part of that tool is okay, how many minutes or hours a day are you actually spending on those 5 relationships? And you'll find when you go through this exercise, and again, I did it myself and I had to call bullshit on myself. I was telling myself, well, this is how I prioritize those 5 relationships. And then I looked over to the right and said, but I'm only spending 5 minutes a day on my faith. And I'm spending, whatever, 8, 10, 12, you fill in the blank hours on work.
Mm-hmm.
So who's bullshitting who here, right?
Right.
And that is a real swift slap in the face to make you take a step back and say, okay, maybe I need to make some shifts in how I'm prioritizing my relationships, and more importantly, how I'm investing my time. Once you get clear on how you prioritize those relationships, you're going to start to shift your schedule around to invest it accordingly, right?
Yep.
And this thing takes time, and I don't have it all figured out, again, to reiterate for the listeners. But if you have this simple format, I think it really, really keeps you in check and keeps you accountable.
Right. Well, it's like learning how to surf. Well, let me get all the theory down first, and then I'll get in the water. No. Just get in the water, splash around, learn to balance. We'll get there. But get in motion. exactly to what you said is actually Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits. Sharpen the saw. What are you doing? I'm chopping down a tree. Well, it's not going very fast. Well, yeah, I'm working as hard as I can. Well, why don't you sharpen the saw? Can't. Too busy sawing. Well, if you sharpen the saw, it cuts faster. It's more efficient. And it's this counterintuitive way. If you take a second and reinvest in yourself, get yourself in the right place, you're re-energized. Don't be achieving to be happy. Be happy and then go achieve. Life gets a whole lot easier. It's a whole lot more fun, and you're a lot more fun to be around. Thank you very much. So yeah, I think that's a great set. And you're just like me. I'm just going to ask questions because you have your answers. You don't need me to tell you what's important to you. You just need sometimes focus the lenses with the right questions.
Yeah, and before I forget, but since you brought up that resource, huge fan of Covey. I've been blessed to spend time with him before he passed a couple of years ago. His son is doing a really good job for children, so he's taken his father's legacy. There's a great book. I don't know if you're familiar with 7 Habits of Highly Effective Children, which his son wrote. And
okay.
I'm sharing that with my children right now at bedtime. So for the listeners, because the theme is, how do we empower our children? I think that there's a great resource there for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I recommend everyone gets a copy of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. I prefer actually the teen version over the effective people version, because I feel like it's more, the examples are a little bit more tangible. It's a little more, not dumbed down, but just the examples are a little more fundamental. And so it's easier to catch on. But I haven't seen the children version, so I'm going to go grab that this weekend and go crush it.
I think, it depends on how old your children are, but it's all going back to the basics, to your point. And while we're talking about tools, because I'm a big fan of tangible tools around finance for the listeners, you probably all have heard of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Kiyosaki. So there is a really cool gamified way to learn about money, cash flow, but there's also cash flow for kids. And to your point, Jeremy, I actually enjoy the cash flow for kids, which is very, very dumbed down version of cash flow. And I play it with my 6 and 8-year-old boys. We make it a fun family activity. We invite friends over, and it's gamified and it's fun. And my 6-year-old could tell you the definition of an asset and what a liability is, and he knows what return on investment is, and he's 6.
That's awesome.
I can guarantee you there's people that have graduated college that couldn't tell you any of those 3 things.
Yep.
Not to hyper focus on money, and I don't want to get into how I feel about the public educational system. But
I can guess.
Yeah, get the game. It's the best $200 you'll invest on your children, right? And
awesome.
instead of sitting in front of the TV and watching.
About new video games are about $60, so you get 3 video games. It's $180 versus you get this game we can do as a family, and we're all getting more financially educated. It's super important. I walk through with my students the 4 quadrants and how that works. For those of you that don't know, you got to go get the book, obviously.
Before I forget, also for back to tangible tools for the listeners, because I'm a big fan of share with me the experience. This one-on-one time, which I could talk to you for about hours, but start with your favorite child first. Hopefully someone got a laugh out of that.
Yeah, of course.
But if you have multiple children, pick one. Start with one. Pick a date, 1 full day every quarter. I do overnights with each child. Block your calendar. You do this for your investors. You do this for your coworkers or the people you work with. Why would you not do it for your loved ones? And then some rules are no electronics and a focused reflection at the end of your time together. And that sounds fancy for, hey, Bobby, or hey, Sue, what did you learn about daddy? Or what did you learn about yourself? Or how can we make our relationship better? It's that simple. And these questions, that just the fact that you're actually taking the time to do the one-on-one with them will floor them. I don't care if they're 2 years old or 20 years old. Just the fact that you approach them and say, hey, I want to nurture and love our relationship and would love to take you blah, blah, blah. You don't need to throw a bunch of money at this. I take my kids down the beach to a little $100 Airbnb, and we tap out, we turn off our phones, and we tell mom and brother that we'll be back in a day. And we go and play and connect with no electronics. I think that's a big point for the listeners, because
absolutely,
electronics are an awesome tool. Technology is an awesome tool, but it can destroy a relationship as well.
Yeah, it's a horrible master. And a lot of people, they're not conscious of what they're doing with technology, and it just becomes repetition and habit. And so my next block in this interview, in this conversation, really, you've actually already answered is give me 3 tips that you feel would help parents to empower their kids. And you've actually already answered them. You're so efficient. The first one was about being present and scheduling time. And then you gave us an actual tangible tool, block out the calendar now. If it's scheduled, it'll happen. If it's, oh yeah, I need to, get out your phone, get out your calendar, put it in right now and say, this is the date. So that's the first one, to be present, schedule a time. Number two is the game of cash flow and reading the, and
7 Habits.
Rich Dad Poor Dad. And then, yeah, the third one I would say is the Habits, Highly Successful Kids version of the 7 Habits. So
Yeah.
would you say those are your top 3, or would you throw in one more to say, hey, parents, if you could do this, if you could get every family in the world to do one simple thing beyond the 3?
Yep, you hit on it earlier, and it sort of piggybacks the one-on-one time. Get outside. Get some fucking dirt under your fingers.
Mm-hmm.
Jump in the ocean. I don't care if you live in the cold north. Go jump in a snowbank. But we have completely forgot about Mother Nature somehow, because we have all this information and technology getting thrown at us, which is great. Again, I don't want to beat up technology,
Mm-mm.
but if you really truly want to have an even playing field with your child, then get down on your knees and your hands. I don't care if your kid's 18 or 8, and get dirty with them. They still want to play. And I think as adults, we have forgotten how to play and have fun. We're so attached to our devices. And again, I am, here it is. I put it away and flipped it over so I can focus on you and the audience. But you got to create boundaries and rules around it, and especially for your children. I have had some pissing matches with some family members whom I love and respect, but they come over through my front door to have a family meal, and they have their phone at the table. So I've actually created some rules around no phones during meals, because you're telling, basically what you're doing is you're telling the people sitting at the table that the internet or whoever's calling you to interrupt is more important than them.
Right.
I mean, let's call a spade, right?
Right. And unless you're a first responder who needs to bounce out because there's an emergency, you really don't. Can your life pause for X amount of time, for an hour or 2? Can your life pause? Are you really that busy and that important, or is it just you're?
And there's back, and back to the question: what's your priority? Is it that emergency call where you're going to go? And God bless, I'm not here to judge that, but is that more important than time with your family? I don't know. That's up for you to decide.
Great. And again, you and I are both in the same place. No judgment, just evaluation. Just look at this is what you say, but here's what you do. So help me understand the discrepancy. How do you rationalize that? I'm not saying you're right or wrong, because it's not my life. It's not my consequences. But enjoy sleeping on the couch. Been there, not in this relationship, but I've been there in the past. So, 2 things to finish up. Number 1, what is one thing? You're a guy, you live your life out loud. You live it a lot online and do a lot of different things. What's one thing most people don't know about you? What's something you haven't put out there before?
Anything?
Anything you feel appropriate, of course.
Of course, yeah. No, I won't get too crazy here.
Yeah, I once shot a man at Reno just to watch him die. For those of you playing along at home.
I think a cool life experience for me, which sounds sexy, and I don't know, I guess it depends on what your version of sexy is, that I did that has been a true, looking back 20 plus years. I took time for myself and went in, volunteered with a group called United Planet, Earthwatch. There's two different trips. Earthwatch. So I am passionate about being outside, like we talked about, conservation, wildlife. Check them out. It's called earthwatch.org. And I went and spent a month in Botswana, in Namibia, in the southern part of Africa, trapping crocodiles for a month in the bush in the Okavango Delta. So most people don't know that about me. I don't think I even talk about it in the book.
That's cool.
But I did it because, number 1, I wanted to give myself the space to do that. I think it was my 30th birthday or around there. And basically you make a donation and then you show up and they take you from there. But it taught me a lot of things. It was a month of being quiet in the bush by myself. No electronics, obviously, no running water. We ran out of food about 2 weeks into a month-long trip. So we had apples and peanut butter to survive on for the last 2 weeks, and whatever fish that we could catch. We weren't hunting, obviously. It was a conservation trip. But it just really, really sent me back to that, getting dirt under my fingers, making a fire to be able to have warm water come out of a homemade shower that we made in the bush, and connecting with a few people that were on the trip, but really just connecting with myself and just being quiet, listening to, elephants break trees like twigs when I was sleeping in my tent as they ran through camp. And I think that it's a pretty radical experience, but I think most people could actually create the space to do that. I think at the time it was like a $2,000 donation, and I had to get myself there. And then you live really simply, so there's not a lot of overhead there. We weren't staying at the Four Seasons. We were sleeping in dirt. And I think it's a cool experience that I probably don't talk about a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. That sounds really, really cool.
And hopefully Earthwatch picks up some clients and volunteers out of it.
Yeah. I'll see about tagging them when we put this out live. I'll tag them in and say, hey, we mentioned, and Brian shared briefly on his experience, because that sounds really, really cool. And it's, people are always looking for ways to contribute and help the world. And they're like, oh, but what can one person do? Well, here's an example. Here's something you could do. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and I did it 20 years ago, so obviously I was single and no kids, but I will take my children on a trip one-on-one to do a similar experience, something, whatever wildlife conservation project they pick. But there's another way to piggyback connecting with the children. Oh, you went muted there, buddy.
Oh, hey, thanks. I hit the wrong button. I coughed, so I muted, and I thought I unmuted. I didn't unmute, but hey. But what I was saying is, I put that in my parenting book for Your Best Child Ever Is This Game Worth Winning. There's a section there talking about, having the family values. You write a mission statement, and then how do you live it? And then how could you leverage multiple deliveries? And the example I use is going and helping, like, at the hurricanes in down south. You go down as a family and you volunteer and that kind of stuff. So the kids can kind of see you living your values. Is really powerful for them. So Brian, this has been a great conversation, and I know we both got to move on with our day. And for our listeners, if they want to know more about Brian, they want to find out, hey, you got this book, I want to get a copy, I want to talk to you, I want to know more about real estate investing, or just being more present for the people in my lives and how you set up boundaries, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. So my two sites on the personal development author side is just my name at brianscrone.com. And our real estate investment firm's site is Holistic REI, which is realestateinvestments.com. And you can put it in the notes.
Perfect. I shall do just that. And last word of wisdom before we sign off.
Take space and time for yourself every day. Game changer. I know it sounds overly simple, but it's a lot harder to do than make the excuse not to. I would say start out with your mornings just giving yourself some space. Most people, their feet hit the floor. If you got wives, kids, you got alarm clocks, you got jobs to get to, people to answer, I say prioritize and give yourself a few minutes every morning. It's simple, but it's free and it's priceless.
Awesome. Yeah. Don't hit the ground running, hit the ground, focus on the important first. Urgent can wait, which is such a strange concept, but so many people are slaves to the urgent first. And then, wait, was that important or not? I don't know, but I had to take care of it. Why? Interesting. So I love that as a parting thought. And it's been great talking with you. We'll definitely do another one of these. Maybe we'll hit more on the financial side a little more specifically next time, and empowering families that side, because that's such an important part. And like you said, if you don't have the financial space, it changes a lot of the conversation of what's available and what's possible. So thank you, Brian. Appreciate your time and your energy. You're doing awesome work, and I'll keep tracking you and keep up on your adventures.
Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate you.
All right. And I heard that because I saw it, and that's it. We're done. Boom.